All right, what is up, guys? Welcome to episode 13 of Straight to the Kokoro. I am joined by my friend, coworker, and in some ways a big mentor to me, Connor Harris. So, Connor, I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's
Yeah,
good to be on here.
this is the second time I've ever done a live one, so it's kind of cool to
Oh,
always sit down in person with someone else.
oh, like in the same room.
Yeah, in the same room.
Oh, gotcha.
It's
Okay.
only been one other time.
Yeah.
So I know, like, part of this, obviously, I told you beforehand, is like anime inspired.
Mhm.
You watched Attack on Titan, but I would consider other stuff like BoJack Horseman that we talked about. Like,
Is that anime?
I mean, it's animated. I know it's not all the
Oh.
same, and that's like a whole debate in itself. But
Is anime short for anime?
no, no, no. So all
Oh,
all anime is animated animation, but not all animation is anime.
okay.
It's like where it comes from geographically is like the main thing.
Japan.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and then like, I think South Korea is grouped in there too, and some other stuff.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So watching Attack on Titan, what was the best and worst moment for you?
I think the worst moment was probably, I mean, the show started off pretty intensely with watching Aaron's mom get eaten and seeing him go through that. That was not something I expected to see in as much graphic detail as they showed it. Um, I was honestly like pretty appalled. In fact, I whenever I watch TV, I'll eat dinner or whatever I'm eating that day or that moment, and I'll watch my TV and shut my brain off. But I can't eat and watch this show. Like, it's just so gross. Like watching people getting eaten alive and like chewing chicken. I'm like, oh, this is not what I want to be doing right now. And it requires you to like really pay attention. Like you can't just watch this show and have it be on in the background like The Office or something like that. So just that bang and like that realization, like, oh, I have to really like hone in on this. That was the hardest thing. That was the hardest hurdle for me to overcome because with any new show, it's like the first 6 or 7 episodes, you just have to get through it. And after that, there's like a moment where you become more emotionally invested. And so for any show, that's the hardest hurdle for me to overcome. But for this one in particular, because it was so jarring and just so disturbing, that took me a little bit to get over. So I'd say that was probably the most challenging portion. But what I liked is I liked how the show wasn't predictable, and I liked how the show really explored some things that I didn't necessarily think it would. I didn't think it was going to make Aaron into the character that it did. He really went down an interesting path, and I thought that that was really bold of the writers of the show, or the comic, or the what do you call it? The
Mangaka. So the person who just the
manga.
manga
Yeah,
writer.
yeah. Was so what did they? That was the source material, right? So
Yeah,
they
this is true to the
gotcha.
manga. Not
Okay.
everything is. So sometimes it's like they're too different. Like the books are very different from the movies, similar to like, I guess, Game of Thrones running out of material.
For sure. Okay. So yeah, I thought it was really bold of them to take him in the direction that they did. I still have no idea how the show ends, but I thought it was really cool. The character development that he had, like we talked about here a couple of times. And honestly, just there's obviously a lot of themes in there with like the Holocaust
Oh, for sure.
and genocide in general. And I like that a lot because I think it just goes to show that when you have two groups of people that don't like each other, when you start to get to know the other group, you realize that they're just pretty much the exact same as you. And they did a really good job of balancing, as most shows don't do when there's two opposing sides of like, these people have their stories, these people have their stories, and neither is right or wrong. You're just meeting somewhere in the middle where there's a conflict, but the conflict is strictly because there is not a mutual understanding between these two groups. And it's just so crazy. Like what's the word I'm looking for? Um, what's the word where it's like advertisement, like marketing for propaganda? The
Oh,
propaganda to make the other people seem alienated and less than human, which is exactly what happened in the genocide or the Holocaust, which was a genocide. I thought that was just really interesting because you see that as like a microcosm of what happens still to this day, just in other ways. And I know I'm bouncing all over the place right now,
no,
but
you're
my
good.
mind, I haven't really like thought about the show this hard since I
No,
stopped
no, go
watching it.
for it.
But yeah, it was an interesting sort of like reflection and microcosm of how social media in particular is like they do that? Like, if you've ever spent any time on Twitter, then you understand that like it's so easy to see people say things like, "Oh, the left is just a bunch of like, libtards who just don't understand blank because blank," or the right is a bunch of fascist idiots who don't understand blank because blank. And it's like, well, you got to understand that like you're going to subscribe to not only the narrative that fits your own and what you're looking for, but also like that's so unfair to call a whole group of people one thing. Like I thought we were past that, you know? And it's just so unfortunate to see the hive mind and group think, sort of still be present to this day and not have people realize it. Like I can personally, I lean more left on the political spectrum, but when I see a lot of the left media, I find it incredibly offensive because it's taking this whole group of people, which I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but I understand their point of view. And I find it just appalling that you could take an entire group of people and say, these people are all idiots. Like they don't understand blank. It's like, if you're saying that, you've probably not spent a lot of time around those types of people to understand where they're coming from.
For
You know what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that too with like people who are really strong. Like I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to politics. Like I just don't follow it. But I've always thought like, what if the thing that makes you decide you're more to the left, right, is like 1% of policy difference or perspective, right? And then like someone just automatically, like you're saying, labels you as like bad in their eyes. And it's like, okay, well, you've never sat down with that person, you've never had a conversation and
Exactly.
realized that like 49 to 51% of the stuff, like 49% of the stuff you agree on, it's the 2% that causes them to shift to the other side.
Yeah. And it's like, why don't if you disagree with them, why don't you go see what their way of life is like? Why don't you have a conversation that doesn't become an argument? And like people don't do that because like, no, that'd make me uncomfortable. I might actually see their point of view,
Yeah,
and then I'd
I
have to
might be
change my
wrong.
own. Which I had to do that when I was in North Carolina. Like I was in a pretty conservative spot of town over there, where there's a lot of rich, wealthy white people, and I got to see kind of what their perspective was because I'd never really been around like true hardcore conservatism before. And like they make some good points about some stuff. I'm like, okay, that's I can see where you're coming from there, but it forced me to become uncomfortable and see that point of view in a way and be open-minded enough to at least consider the fact that I could be wrong. But when you grow up and if you go to the other side of the spectrum, like that's me, like if you grow up in a very religious household, you grow up in strong values households, which I think that is one good thing about the South, is that family is a huge value to them. And but as a result of that, it can be hard to form your own opinions when you are so integrated and within one mindset growing up. If that makes sense, it's hard for us to step outside of that and consider the fact that maybe what we did know growing up isn't the full picture.
Yeah, and I think like I know you love to travel. I think that's where travel kind of
Yeah.
comes into play, where it's like, how do you get really outside of your like you didn't just go to the other side of your town or
Mhm.
the other side of your state. Like you're in a whole different environment. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that about living here on the West Coast versus being on the East Coast. Like people are different. Like the temperament of people is different. Like I mean, going to other countries, which I know we've both done, right? Like hospitality is different. Like
Yeah.
social etiquette's different. The time of day they consider going out late is different.
Hmm.
Like, I guess off of that, is there any like trip you've taken that like you just walked, you came back from it and you were just like that was very eye opening relative to a lot of other travel you've done?
Mm. I think um I think the recent trip I did to Spain, I talked to local people more than I have any other trip. For context, I've been to Italy, Switzerland, New Zealand, Colombia, Peru, and the United Kingdom, and now Spain and Portugal on this trip. And I made a point to talk to people, and I was wondering, like, how happy are people over here? You know, like what's going on? So I talked to some local people and I realized that they really actually are, I think, from what I can understand, on average, happier than most Americans. Because over here in America, we have so many things that are just baffling to people that live in Europe. And if there's anyone that's in Europe listening to this, they could probably agree with that. And so I'd ask them, like, seems like this is a beautiful town you live in. It seems like things are going pretty well overall. I know you guys like have things that always could be better, but you seem like you're pretty content with how things are, which is what a lot of people I talk to appear to be like. So like, so are you happy? Like this would be a, I'm summarizing a very extensive conversation. And they'd be like, yeah, things aren't bad. I'd say, but like what's the but? And they're like, there isn't any but, it's just actually pretty good over here. And I was like, wow, that's so interesting. Like my American mind wants to think that there is a catch to everything, and that no, you can't really be happy. What are you talking about? That's not like there's got to be some problems you have that you really need to sort out or something like that. But no, really over there, like they actually, on average, from, I mean, I'm also living in America, so I'm more exposed to this, but it really did seem like they had a lot more figured out in terms of prioritizing what actually makes them happy as people over there. That was a really big takeaway for me, is like they don't work as much. They're not thinking about work as much. They're way more socially integrated in a lot of ways Americans aren't. And they're also just way healthier too.
Yeah. No, I definitely think of the social part. Like community is so different. Like I've heard of, like, on my dad's side, there's like a place in Italy or a town in Italy where like apparently a ton of my families live there, and like everyone knows everyone, right? Like you have more of that like tribalism where like I don't think that's as, yeah, it's not as common here. And then capitalism's obviously always shoving down like
Yeah.
we need a new Ferrari, and it's like we need clean water. Like I
Yeah.
think, yeah, there's just less of a drive maybe towards materialism in the same way.
For sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like in America, like, I don't think I realized how integrated it is within me to chase more. And I'm not saying this egotistically or anything. I really don't mean it this way. But like I can, if I stopped making money and just like kept the amount of income I have right now, I would be comfortable and I could live my life and do the things I want to do. But there's like an inherent drive within me that keeps me up at night sometimes, that makes me think I need to keep doing more. I need more income, growth, 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 growth. Because that's like what's ingrained within our economy, is it's a growth-based economy. So if it's not growing, you're not succeeding, even though like, hey, maybe things aren't so bad. So for me, I'm trying to dissociate from the idea that I need to always have be in the green all the time with everything and constantly see this exponential graph that is going up. And it took me, some time to realize that that is inherently ingrained into who I am and what I am seeking out of life. But a lot of that is also cultural and just being an entrepreneur and being on social media and all that stuff. Uh, but over there, that's not. I was just baffled to be like, that's not on your radar nearly as much. And it's not like there's some, dude in a hoodie and sunglasses, like behind a computer, like trying to get us to, believe certain things. I don't think there's a meeting at midnight under a full moon with a bunch of politicians that are like, okay, what can we do to make these guys, our slaves and make them obedient to us? I think it's just naturally born out of capitalism. And I think capitalism can breed selfishness and it can blind us to certain things that aren't necessarily best for us. And everyone is just trying to do what's best for them at the end of the day. So I think it gets to a point where it's like, I'm going to do me, I'm going to take care of me. And by doing that, I'm going to probably disregard certain needs that I have, even though I inherently probably understand that, like, yeah, this is probably good for me to, take care of myself a little bit better. But at the end of the day, everyone else is chasing these things, and therefore it makes me and other people feel like I need to also chase those things.
For sure. And I feel that way even coming back after this weekend. Like the second I was back home, I just noticed the urge of like, I didn't check my phone for 2.5 days. It was great because my phone just died and I actually never charged it. And I was just like, okay, I gotta check on like what did I miss on Instagram? Like what's the world doing? But
Yeah.
like that wasn't too much of a problem while I was away. There was, times I thought about a couple things related to here, like stuff with friends back home, but it wasn't like one of those things where I was like, oh crap, I really miss like watching Instagram stories. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm just in the moment. But I think that's like I just hear that and I think as someone myself who personally compares a lot because like I think it's like same thing on Instagram for the most part, right? Like most people share like the highlight aspects of their life. Like
Mhm.
I'm learning to play the tuba, and I don't think anyone actually wants to learn to play
Share
the
that
tuba.
shit on there.
But like, you meet people and they're typically going to share the things that maybe they aren't just passionate about, but that other people will perceive as kind of
Mhm.
like them pushing the needle forward. And then internally, at least for me, it triggers like, I'm like, shit, I never finished learning piano.
Yeah.
It's like I'm falling behind this guy. And it's like, I think the same thing, especially like that's what social media I feel like sometimes drives to is like someone figured out a new way to pronate the foot. It's like, oh shit, like I'm behind, right? And
Yeah.
I know you always think about this stuff because you'll come in sometimes excited, and it's like, your passion is tied into what you do for entrepreneurship
Mhm.
versus I think other people that just mindlessly kind of grind because that's what they were conditioned to do. And there's
Yeah.
other things behind that, but it's like less of a fulfillment thing too. They're grinding to grind, and there's still a reason underneath that, but it's not like for passion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I I came to a point in my life where I had to ask myself, like, do I actually love this, or am I doing it because I've seen some degree of success with it and I want to continue to do it because it feeds my ego? And I think it's not that, because I love that question of like, if you were to have all the money in the world, what
Mm,
would you do with your time? And I genuinely think it's this. Like I would, I mean, I was doing this for no money for a very long time.
yep.
Not relative to a lot of other people, that's not fair to say, but for a long time, relative to my career length, um, I was doing it for very little money. And I still loved learning about it. Like I think it's cool that we can come in and spend an hour like trying to see how much posterior expansion we can get in a side plank, and just like messing around with a bunch of different variations of that. I think that's what's really cool. Like it never gets old to me, messing around with new things. And just the number one thing obviously is just reading comments of like, you've changed my life, or like someone I've never met on the internet comments on a YouTube video like, this has completely, changed the way that I can move and feel. Like that's, to me, that's crazy. Like it's such a sense of purpose and fulfillment unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah, and obviously this is overly reductionist, right? But like I hear that and I just think the same thing. I thought at some time because I've asked myself that question too. Like if I had all the money or enough money, and it's like that's not a thing. Like at one point I was like, I would just open a PT clinic for free in like a gym,
Yeah,
like for the heck of it. And like it's to be of service to other people. Like
absolutely.
that's like the simplest thing I hear in you saying that. And even when I think now, obviously
Mhm.
it's evolved to something slightly different than like I don't want a PT clinic at this point.
Yeah, no, I
But
think I think everyone needs purpose, and I think that's a huge thing, and that's a very common theme I see in people in my life who are not fulfilled, is they don't have a sense of purpose and what drives them. And I'm very very fortunate to have found that early on. And I wish everyone had something like that, but it's hard to find, and it's easy also to take for granted. And it's one of those things that, why do you wake up in the morning? Waking up is easily the hardest part of my whole day. I hate
mm,
it. But I still do it because I know that there is, like, I'm going to wake up and hopefully change someone's life today, type
yeah,
of thing. And that's worth getting up for every single time.
no, I think that's beautifully said. That reminds me of a conversation Elish and I had about like there's fulfillment and then like happiness, and they aren't the same. Like fulfillment is like being this isn't his wording, this is mine, just so it's not like you might feel like shit, but you could still be living a fulfilling life. Like you could have days that
Yeah.
suck ass, right? But you're waking up with the perspective that like, hey, I'm going out to do this thing that could potentially change someone's life. Even on
Yeah.
the days that you're just like, I just want 30 more minutes of sleep, and that turns into 2 hours.
Yeah. No, that's like burnout. Like, you have a burnout story.
Oh yeah, dude, I've definitely. I mean, I think it was more just when I was working at Hype. in New York City and then working my business job. And that was just like 7 days a week ish, probably at least 6 days a week for 6 months. And I just remember between like the commute time, doing that, kind of being pushed and pulled between like pursuing what I loved and my passion, and then, making enough money.
Mhm.
And I just feel like, yeah, I just was at one point, I was like, this just like, I don't have a weekend. There's very little downtime. And I just feel like I'm running on the hamster wheel.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Um,
Yeah, I know exactly what that feels like.
but I think with that too, like, I think there's just so much pushback. Like, I'd be curious to hear for you what it was like. Like, I know when I was initially going to school and I changed majors at one point for business, like, there's the initial support, but then kind of this gaslighting ish way. It's like, yeah, I want you to do what you love, but like, how are you going to make any money? Like, it's like,
Mm,
okay, instead of just being like, I think a lot of people are just conditioned to like you do business because you'll always have like you hear these phrases sometimes
yeah.
possibly like you'll always have a job if you're in this like engineering business, like that stuff like that, versus if someone's like, hey, I really love painting, and it's like instead of someone being like pour everything into it and
Mm,
see where that goes, that might be the most fulfilling way they could ever live their life. Like, I think it's very hard for people, especially at a younger age, to be like, I'm gonna pave my own way despite I have all this opposition from like parents, teachers, you know what I mean, stuff like that.
did you did you have that
Oh yeah, for sure.
mostly from parents?
I would say from parents and then just other people. I mean, I grew up in a relatively affluent area, I would say New Jersey. And like I would tell people I want to do that. And even like sales reps that would visit my dad and sell him like parts for trucks, stuff like that, would be like, oh, like, their son's an accountant or they have older kids than people our age. And at that time, being like 19, they were like, yeah, that's great. But like, you can do that on the side. How are you going to make a living? It's like,
Mm,
okay, like, it's interesting that's the perspective people have had, and that's one thing that used to piss my parents off a ton because I definitely argued a decent amount, was like fulfill living your whole life to work or working most of your life in a job that doesn't make you fulfilled, and then retiring and bitching about how hard you worked for like the last, well, estimate 25 years you're going to live after retirement.
mhm.
Like, doesn't make any, that model doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it
Like,
really doesn't. Yeah.
and I feel like that's what I've watched a lot of older people, like my grandparents, talk about. Like, I worked this hard for this long. Yeah, now you just sit at home and
Now
watch,
you're old.
or you
Yeah.
watch horse races, dude. Like I would want to live a life that when I die, I can look back and be like the same way I know you feel about traveling and you talk about like I've lived, like, and then whatever happens next.
So how'd you overcome your parents' expectations?
Mushrooms. Like, I would probably say, like, I had my first trip and that was just a lot of space. Like, I was suffering immensely, like in my own head. I think it was the first time I realized I had like an ego. Like, there was
Mm,
a voice in my head of that self-talk that wasn't me thinking. Like, because you might have people have thoughts like, no, I'm not gonna do that. It's like, yeah, you will. And it's like, okay, I didn't just
yeah, it's
think,
just a conditioned response.
yeah, but like it just emerges, yeah, reactively. Like, it's not you consciously choosing to think that next thing.
Yeah.
And then like my second mushroom trip, I just remember it was like I was talking and it was like, okay, what do I actually want to do with my life? As I was like in Elish's apartment, and he's like, do you care about lab equipment? I was like, no, I want to help people and I love studying movement. And it's like,
Yeah.
because I had been through the whole PRI route coming back from tearing my labrum, and that was like a whole loss of identity, and I would say like a very early existential crisis.
Mm,
But then being able to get back to it after kind of being like hopeless in the traditional PT model of like, it's going to be better, but it's never going to be right. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem very good.
yeah. Yeah. That's, so that was like your catalyst for overcoming, which is, I mean, personally, I think I was really lucky. Like it's weird. I look back on it now. I've never really thought about it like this, but my brother he was like a prodigy from a young age in the sense of like the dude's first word was moon, and now he's in control of he's leading a project for SpaceX, and he's like trying to put the internet in space for everyone, and talks to Elon Musk like every week. He's like a really big deal, but I never felt the pressure to be similar or better than him. And I
That's
don't
really
really know
good.
why that is. Even though I think that would be probably a normal thing to feel,
Oh,
be
for
totally
sure.
warranted. But I never felt that way. I think part of it was because as long as I can remember, my dad would always tell me, and instill this confidence in me that I could do anything I wanted to if I put my head to it. And he like really said that a lot. And he made me feel like I was, even though I didn't believe it, I was like, dude, that's so corny. I'm looking back on it, like I think that was a subconscious thing that was instilled in me. And so I do have confidence to just take action and not really necessarily consider like, can I do this? It's like, I'm gonna do this and let's see what happens. And I think that was a really important parenting step that he took. And I'm sure he knew what he was doing, but at the time, I thought it was very corny. But now I realize, like, wow, that actually probably set my mindset in a way that a lot of parents don't do for their kids.
In addition to thinking it was corny, if you can recall, did you feel like he genuinely meant it?
Yes.
Okay, see, I think that's like like the corniness make like you can totally feel that. I mean, there are moments, but I think like you being able to recognize that you actually felt authentically he meant that
Hmm.
versus like, it's like, I was talking to Ellis the other day. It's like me being like, yeah, you can do anything you want, and then me being like, you do anything you want, and like
Yeah.
me looking you in the eye and like genuinely expressing that versus someone just be like, yeah, yeah, your fourth grade math teacher's like, you can do anything.
I mean, he was right in the sense, and I'm not trying to like talk myself up here. Um, I'm just trying to give examples of how it helped me. So when I was trying to play the piano at a young age, there was this song that was like way too hard. My fingers were not big enough to play this song, but I insisted that I did it. and I remember I practiced it just over and over and over again for like 6 months. And I got to the point where I was actually able to play it like a hotel lobby in front of a crowd. And I think it was like honestly one of the proudest moments my dad ever had for me, because it was one of those things where it's like he actually did this, and like his piano teacher told him he couldn't do it. It wasn't like that big of a deal, but like having that confirmation of like someone thought I couldn't do something, no matter how small, and I was still able to do it. Like he would always reference that moment as like, that's an example of you being able to do something if you set your mind to it. And I don't know if I ever have a kid, I think that's an incredibly valuable lesson that I will take forward into that.
For sure. No, I mean, I think that's to me that sounds like a big deal just because like I tried to play the piano and I only got a week in before COVID, but like I know it's not easy one, like the dexterity of like people's fingers and like I know there's a right and a wrong way to like
Mhm.
move your hand down the keys.
Yeah.
Like because I remember the first time I had a lesson, I was like, I've been doing YouTube tutorials and he's like, yeah, that's not how you do this.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, but like to be able to do it in front of a crowd of people too is like and to yeah, to drill it that deeply that it's like, and you can read sheet music too, I know, right?
Not anymore, but I used to
Okay,
be able
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like just that too is like whole other level versus like, people who just hear stuff or if you're watching the YouTube tutorial where it's literally like
Yeah.
you're
Literally showing you
the exact key, how long you hold it for, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I just got this. But no, that's crazy, man. Is there anything I guess you've been wanting to dive into in your life outside of or inside of like what we do for work
It's a good question.
that you feel like you're called to kind of explore?
Um, I think that when COVID first started, I was dealing with a lot of isolation, and I was I always tell people like I was doing COVID for like 2 years before COVID actually started, because I was so incredibly socially isolated when I was living in North Carolina. All I could do was work because I had one friend and he left me, bastard. And then I moved back to Oregon and COVID started. So I basically just grinded my whole life away for 2 solid years. That was more like a year and a half after that. And then I told myself I would deal with the consequences of that. And so at this point in my life, I'm trying to put the pieces together of like, what else is there? Like, who is Connor outside of what I love to do? Because so much of my identity is wrapped up in what I do. But what am I outside of that?
I feel
And
that.
I think a lot of my good and bad traits are wrapped up in what I do for work, but I don't know how they are expressed outside of that. And I don't know how to do that and explore those things other than to probably try a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to try a bunch of different stuff when you have a habit of what works and what makes you feel fulfilled. So it's like, why should I change anything? Yeah, there are some points in my week where I feel like I could fall asleep standing up, but I need to be able to break that habit. But it's been a habit that's been ingrained for me for like literally 4 years, 5 years at this point. It's like, how do I explore new things, find who I am outside of what I do? But that requires so much of that. It feels currently like at the moment that would require a lot of me to break a habit that I know is so foundational and important for me, if that makes sense.
What's the habit that you feel so foundational and important?
Routine. My
Oh, just the
routine of my week.
structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, because yeah, you're introducing change. Like you might have to figure out how to do some things without other people that you're familiar with doing current things with, right?
Mhm.
Because I immediately think of like Renee Brown, and I think it was on a podcast.
Mm.
She told her daughter, like, you just do as many things as you want. I don't care. Like, you just can't quit anything until like the season was over for sports, or like,
Mm.
try a bunch of different majors. It's knowing what you don't want is in some way gets you closer to what you do want.
Yes.
No, but I mean, I get that. I think with that, I just think like in some ways, maybe there's like small windows you try hobbies or something. I mean, it really depends what you're looking to do, right?
There
If,
is.
if
Yes.
it's like, like trying to play a new instrument, it's like, okay, 15 minutes a day. And then is this enough? Like after doing it for a week that enjoy sitting down to do it.
Yeah.
But other stuff's obviously harder, right? Like you decide you want to go kayaking. That's a bit more of a commitment. Like you need to go to a physical place.
Yeah.
Like there's other requirements. I won't say barriers, but I think requirements to be able to do that thing.
Yeah. It's such like I think the more you get, for not that I'm old or anything, but it seems to me, and based off of patterns of behavior I've observed of people getting older and seeing what older people do, is like you get so ingrained in a routine and you become so much less open to the idea and action of change because you become solidified in multiple different ways. And so I never want to be like that, but I see myself becoming like that. So I'm making excuses as to why I can't do that. But in reality, I should just like get out there and just fucking try to do some stuff, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in some sense, like at least over this past weekend, there are a lot of moments I didn't want to do something that I also wanted to do. So there was this internal struggle. And then I was like, in a lot of moments that I felt like I was like, this is the last thing I want to do. I'm like, just roll the dice. It's either gonna blow up or not, but I'm not gonna know until I'm on the other side.
Yeah.
And it still sucked in some moments. At least in that context, it was like emotionally heavy in some moments, but it was like by the time it was over, it was like, okay, what can I reflect on this experience, even the same day? And I was like, okay, I'm good. That was worth doing. And now I have
Mhm.
another repetition or benchmark for some time. Next time shit feels that same way. And it's like, okay, what happened the last time versus like, what's the narrative of like, if I do this thing or take that action, like, shit's gonna go horribly wrong. I don't know, my family will abandon me, or whatever,
Yeah.
like exaggeration. Or and then there's obviously the reasonable ones, but it's like most of the time I feel like what we think is never as bad as what actually happens. Or like the story you
True.
tell yourself of what's gonna happen, like is never generally like the equivalent of what it actually happens.
There's that scene in The Boys where Frenchie is, God, I don't remember what exactly was happening, but there was something the equivalent of like, they were going to hurt someone. And Frenchie was like, no, I'm not going to do that because I can never hurt you as much as you hurt yourself with your own thoughts. And I thought that that was really interesting. I was like, that's so true. Like the pain and the angst of our day to day and what we go through, that's probably the average person would consider as negative. So much of that is self imposed if you really think about it and break it down. Like so many of our own barriers are literally just our own self created barriers. And there, so much of the negativity we have is just completely upstairs when in reality is really not that bad to do. Like you said, take that leap and just try something and then observe after how you feel and kind of break it down a little bit. Was that worth doing? Yes. Am I still alive? Yes. Everything is probably just fine.
Yeah, I think with that, like at least depending on the intensity of the thing, there's just like other things you need in your life to be able to do that.
Mhm.
Like I think you need other people that have helped that you know will still be there for you no matter what, especially when you're in situations with new people.
Yeah.
Because like if you don't have much to hold on to, like then you're either gonna do one of two things probably. You're gonna like cling so dearly to it that if you lose those people or that identity or whatever that
Mhm.
thing is, like you're screwed. And then someone else, maybe it's a lot easier. It's like I have almost nothing. What does it cost me to lose this?
Yeah. I
Like
guess that's like a bigger thing, right? That'd be taking a bigger step, like changing your major or something like that. I'm talking like day to day,
oh yeah, yeah.
like little things of like, should I initiate this conversation with this person, or should I, um,
I agree with that. Yeah,
like, should I approach this cute girl at the bar type of thing?
for
Like,
sure.
like, oh my God, my whole life's gonna end and she says no type of thing. But I understand when you're talking about bigger, grander changes
Yeah,
that
I
could
didn't
really
realize what
influence
you.
your life. No, that's the two different perspectives though. Like you're exactly right when it comes to something that is a big change, like moving across the country to work in some random dude's gym. Like that would be an example of something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say with that, like that's a bit of a like somewhat of a tangent for me. Like I just knew what I was doing working in a commercial big box gym was not
Mhm.
fulfilling. And like there was so much more I could learn, so much more I could explore in general in my life that I was like, this isn't it. So like something's gotta change.
Yeah.
But no, I think with the other examples you're saying for sure, like I think there's a lot of like conditioned things that people have to learn to put down where it's like, maybe someone believes they're not good enough, good looking enough to talk to like X girl, or you're on the other side of that X guy. Like, or it's like people don't do that. And it's like, well, why don't people do that? Because I was told people don't do that. And
Yeah.
like there's a reasonable standard obviously for shit you should and should do,
Mhm.
but like otherwise, nah, yeah, it's like if you I think that's where it comes into place of like the emotion might not match like it's not going to feel the way you might want it to feel, at
Mhm.
least for me, where it's like I want to feel good that like if I'm going to go approach some girl at a bar, like okay, I feel really confident right now. It's like no, I'm scared shitless I might get rejected. It's like okay, like is that abnormal, is that wrong to feel? It's like no, but the expectation that I should feel
Yeah.
like really pumped up about it, also not wrong, but like what's the more probable too, depending on my personality.
Yeah. I mean, just breaking it down like that, I think could go a long way for a lot of people. Like just really thinking about it in those terms, I think has a lot of value. And then you can make it a little bit more digestible, that action you're going to take. I think a lot of this can just be not solved, but at least more easily understood if we just think about it a little bit more. I think people are used to taking action without critical thinking to a certain extent. It's like what we were talking about way earlier when like propaganda and things like that. Like if you really think about the fact that this person has an agenda of what they're trying to tell you, and you think about what that agenda might be and how that might influence their message towards you,
Oh, for
but like
sure.
how many people actually do that? What they really see is like something that they agree with or something that pisses them off, and then it's like, the whole cascade happens. It's so emotional, but like just taking a little bit of a step back, like that's been very helpful for me to like understand messages that people are putting out, especially on social media. Like think about why someone would want you to believe something if it's about exercise. Like I have biases. What I talk about fits my narrative for sure. And I'm not afraid to admit that. But at the same time, like what I do in the context of what I do works and it really helps people. Am I missing a piece here and there? Yeah, definitely. But this is why my perspective is one perspective. And while I recognize that there's probably weaknesses in the arguments I make with some things. Like, yeah, that's what other people are there to challenge you for to a certain extent. I can't get upset when someone does that. I have to be able to change my mind. I have to be able to, remove my emotion from that situation. That's definitely a big tangent, but
No, I definitely agree. I mean, I think it's super relevant. It's relevant, incredibly relevant in what we do in fitness.
mhm.
Because I think like that's what we were talking about last week, right? Like it's so easy to take something out of context too,
Yeah.
where it's like this exercise is bad, and it's like
So you're saying,
Yeah, like it's like, hey, so I like oranges, and it's like, so you fucking hate pineapples. And it's like,
yeah,
I never
yeah,
said
yeah.
that.
I
Like,
know.
but like I think again, like you talk about too, like I remember I had someone challenge me one time on a it was the propulsion arc, like really early when Pat had just went to the I think he had went to the first intensive, like, and he was going back again
Mhm.
because he wanted more. And like someone's like, yeah, that's not how gate works though. And I was like literally so confused. I was just like, is he right or am I right? Like I don't know. So I just reached
Mhm.
out and I was like, I mean, I knew Pat well enough that he would answer me
Mhm.
at that point. And he was like, no, no, you're right, just ignore this guy. But like it literally messed me up like a little bit. I was like, well, now I'm not sure if I just posted inaccurate information. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, is this right? Or like, is he? And it is in more subtle ways because walking isn't exactly a squat,
Mhm.
but it was no, it's just one of those things where you get comments every so often where it's like, this person has no idea what they're talking about. And it's like, there's so much, like you're saying with the propaganda, right? Like, not the same exact thing, but it's like, this post was made to talk about getting a better ribcage pelvis relationship, not talking about getting big
I
laughs.
know.
Like, and it's like, oh, okay, well, those are two different things, right?
I'll
Like,
never forget. I made a post about why band around the knees is not good for glute activation. And I said in the video, in the context of the way I am discussing it, what I mean is, and then almost, I would say 2/3 of the contact of the comments said, so what you're saying is, or, but when I do it like this happens. And I'm just like, no.
I literally, I feel like have you ever read like an email or a text message where your eyes just grab one part? You completely miss the first
Yeah,
chunk, and you're like,
yeah,
"What do you mean you're not coming home for dinner?" No, what I said is I'm gonna not come home for dinner next week, and it was like,
yeah,
oh, I just really latched on to like
yeah.
one part of that.
It's unreal. I
Like,
mean, we all do it to a certain, I know I do with
oh,
certain
for
things,
sure.
but I try to recognize at least that I'm not doing it or I am doing it and try to adjust. But I think there's a difference between people who consume content on social media and people who post on social media. I would say I consume maybe like a half an hour of content per week on social media
It's amazing.
because I intentionally try to avoid the comparison game. I don't look at people's stories. I don't do any of that because it helps me stay sane. And I think people that consume content a lot, that they're exposed to a lot more stuff. And so potentially, you know, you form an opinion based off of the people that you follow, and then someone says something against that, and then it's just cascades from there. But for me, like, to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of in my own little world over here. Like I'm just kind of like I I try to I'm constantly like taking courses, learning more stuff, but I'm not necessarily aware of what, Brett Contreras said about the glutes yesterday. I'm not fully aware of like what the general narrative going around is. Like I was super behind on the N1 thing that got really popular because I just don't consume content on social media. And so, like I'll say something, I'll try to be as clear as I can, but there might be, it might go against something someone said, or I might post something that's similar to what someone else said. Like, oh, you're copying what I'm saying. Like, dude, I didn't even know that person like posted in the last 2 weeks.
Oh
You
no,
know,
for sure.
it's 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 just so hard to navigate those waters. But what I've found to be helpful is just not picking fights and just, doing my thing, trying to be realistic about things. I think that's gone generally well.
No, I think you're one of the friendliest people in like the fitness circle because I think there's like a lot of
Right.
people. Like I've literally seen people where it's like I'm gonna show you this today, and everyone's gonna be doing it. Like it was in someone's caption one time. It was
Yeah.
like listen, man. And like this person has confrontation with other people at times. Like, but it's like one of those things where it's like it generally doesn't benefit anything. I mean, you can then get like the tribalism aspect of it, where it's like, hey, I like this guy more than that guy. But I just feel like at the end of the day, to not kind of go that direction with it. It's like someone super early on is like your followers might not be their followers. So
Hmm.
like yeah, you follow each other, and it's like he made a post on glute kickbacks, so did I. But it's like okay, well, we both have 15K followers, and only 11 of them overlap. Like
Yeah.
the other X percent like are unique and might never be the same two people.
Yeah. Yeah. And on one hand, it's like kind of nice when you have someone back you up on something. Like that's been really nice because I've at this point I know people that would support me if there was a conflict, and that really does mean the world to me. Those people like always make an effort to support my stuff. They always make an effort to reach out, like crack a joke on my story or something like that, and that is just so cool. Like that's, but at the same time, like everyone that has been, a content creator, been doing stuff for a while, like there's certain people you like more, certain people you like less. So I'm sure I rub some people the wrong way. And that's just something you have to accept, but it's incredibly challenging. And it's probably the biggest hurdle any new content creator has to overcome is the fear of judgment and the fear of just getting hate. Because I remember the first time I got hate, oh my God, I was paralyzed. I was at a dinner with my mom. This one guy just came at me. I won't name names, but most people that are aware of my content are also aware of this person. And I was literally paralyzed. Like I was at a dinner with my mom. Like I just shut down completely emotionally. Like I had to leave early. I was really beat up about it. And going through that experience was incredibly helpful for me because I realized that although there was some reasons why that person did those things that were, their own shit that they were dealing with. But also it's impossible to do anything on the internet and not bother someone.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just going to happen.
I
And
mean,
so now it's like, I just accept it that, for every one person that hates me, there's probably 100 people who get value out of what I say.
yeah, and I think that's more important because like the people that dislike it oftentimes like I think it goes back to like we were saying earlier with like our own biases. Like it doesn't fit like they grew up on the NASM corrective exercise specialist model,
Mhm.
which I but a lot of things like I feel like in my experience are the same things just presented in different ways. Like maybe the mechanism's different, but you're all trying to get to the same place. And like upper cross syndrome is also this and another school of thought. Like
Mhm.
it's explained multiple ways. It's just like, are you looking at the fascia? Are you looking at the bones? Are you getting into the pressure stuff?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, it doesn't obviously make sense to some other people because it's just not the lens in which they were taught it through.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
But
different than what I'm used to. And therefore, I don't like it. It
I
just
just,
goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning.
I mean, I just feel like that's Reddit. Like, I know we both have spent time
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Reddit. Like,
It's just the internet, I
it's
think.
like, I love, I don't know, whatever this movie was. And it's like, I both hate movies and this person. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
why are you commenting on this? Like, I actually had that happen one time, and I just remember well, what you took the time out of your day to come here and tell me this, despite
Yeah.
it like had no relevance to the thread, and this was on Reddit,
Yeah.
and it was like this doesn't help. If anything, it just you venting.
I know. And what
Uh,
are you expecting to happen? Like, are you expecting me to like coming at me with like a hateful comment or anyone with a hateful comment? Like, are you expecting that person to read and go, "Oh, you know what? You're right. Let me change everything I do now and conform to this hate and just, completely just change everything I'm doing." It's like, no, like you're literally never going to change someone's opinion with any sort of animosity or starting off an antagonistic attitude. It's never going to happen.
oh,
I
for
can't
sure.
think of one time it's ever happened in my whole life.
I feel like that's the easiest way to just shut down conversation. Is like you walk up to someone and you're like, "You're wrong," and it's like,
Yeah.
"Okay, cool. Well, I'm
Yeah.
probably already triggered."
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's like now break down for me, like whatever else is going on.
It's incredible.
But I know we got to get some rest in between before we open up for the evening
Oh
here.
yeah.
But I guess the last piece of advice, and I just thought of this, if you can give your younger self one piece of advice at this point in your life, and
Mm,
obviously, like we're both still really young, like
mhm.
what would it be if you could go back to, and you, I guess, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, and this isn't too specific, like think about whether it be like childhood Connor, teenage Connor, college Connor, if there's one piece of advice you had for any of those segments at any point. It doesn't have to be
Mm,
like an exact age. What would one thing be? It doesn't have to be like the most important thing. Like do this and you'll be good.
mm. That's a good question. I've never thought of that before. I would say,
Neither have I.
uh, is my goal to improve my life? in general, or is it to improve my career? Like what is my goal with this piece of advice?
I guess, yeah, let's go with like
One
maybe
for each?
let's yeah, if you could think of one for each, but if you can't, I would say maybe something like one piece of advice you would give yourself at some point in your younger life
Mm,
that would help you live a more fulfilling, better life in some way, or help you
mm,
get to where you want to be.
okay. Yeah, so I think like in terms of a fulfilling better life, I think it would be um, to truly genuinely recognize, and I know this is like maybe cliche, but it's so true. Understand that the quality of your life is dictated by the quality of your relationships. And that is just, I think that's it. Like, I really do think, like, if someone were to say, like, how can you summarize how to be happy? I think that's probably it. But that's obviously incredibly reductionist. And, it's like, obviously, it's not just one thing, obviously. But in terms of what's made the biggest difference in my quality of life happiness, it's 100% that. I would also say, in terms of career things in general, what would put me on the path to doing what I want to do, I think it would be to develop habits early on that if you do X thing for the X habit for a period of 2 to 3 years and you do it consistently, then you are going to end up in a place that's very likely where you want to be. That's realistic and practical. So that would be like for me, what I did early on was I was like, all right, do your content creation, all your stuff on Mondays, get it out of your way, and then just organize the rest of your week around whatever you need to do. And that habit was very, very important for me. I just didn't discover the fact that I needed to do that until way too late. Not way too late, but way too later. That I would prefer to have had that skill and that habit built up way earlier. And I still consider myself very lucky, very young to be doing what I'm doing. But also, I think establishing those habits that literally just become ingrained in you, I think are really important because it's that thing of like discipline outweighs motivation every single time. And so I think that's probably some advice I would give, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. There's no like pill you can take. Actually, there is. But there's no pill you can take
Limitless movement.
metaphorically, and all of a sudden, that was not the right metaphor to use, to be completely honest with me, because Adderall is a real thing, and that's
Yeah, but there's a
that's
consequence to that,
there's a
obviously.
consequence to that.
I wonder if Bradley, yeah, I mean, there was consequences to Bradley Cooper taking the pill
Yeah,
Limitless
yeah, yeah,
too, until he worked out the
yeah,
kinks, but no one's done
yeah,
that with
yeah.
Adderall yet.
Don't abuse Adderall. That's not a good thing. I did that in college. Didn't work out super well for the rest of my life. But uh, having that foundation built is, I think that's what's going to set the stage. Because if you look at anyone, a lot of the people that I eventually want to have certain levels of success of, they all tend to say the same exact thing. It's like you keep grinding, you keep go, and then you hit a point, an inflection point where just like you can't turn back. Like your growth is literally exponential. And I'm fine with that not happening for a while longer. I'm very happy with where I'm at. But I think that's based off of what I've heard from people that are way more successful, smarter than me, that appears to be what it is.
No, I would definitely say I think of like James Clear's Atomic Habits, which I haven't read, but like
Mhm.
the 0.001 or whatever percent better every day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can think of some people, at least I know in like fitness and movement, that are definitely like it's this time of the day, like they're
Yeah.
doing this thing, like
Mhm.
that's it. Yeah.
I wish there was a sexier answer.
I mean, I think that's yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of what we do for work too, though, is like, what's the movement that's gonna like blow up my quads? If it's like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to do the same things you already know how to do. Just
What are your top 3 favorite PRI exercises? Well,
there's
it's
only
not how that works.
yeah. I mean, there's only one actual exercise that matters, but
Yeah.
it's breathing, or you die.
Oh,
But cool, man. Well, I mean, no, this has been cool. I definitely wasn't anticipating it going in some of the directions it went. That's
Neither
always
did
the
I.
fun part about these.
Yeah.
If you want to be found, where can people find you? If you don't want to be found, you don't have to say anything.
I'd prefer not to be found.
Okay, that's totally fine. You don't need to find Connor, but thank you for being on, man. And
Of course.
I'll see you in like about an hour.
Sounds good. Bro.